What's up, everybody? This is Everybody Settle Down. I'm Charlie Marlow. That is the great Eric Messersmith. I am joining you from boring and rainy St. Louis, Missouri. Now, you wouldn't know. Behind that curtain, this is a peek behind the curtain, literally, is the most beautiful view of Cabo. But can you show them a little bit? Can we show them a
I'll
little bit, Eric?
yeah, we'll give him a taste.
Just a little taste. Eric is in Cabo right now.
Oh, wait, hold on, I gotta
Okay, wait.
stand up.
All right, stand up. We're good. Don't worry. It's all good. Look at this view. Look at this view. Unbelievable. That is Cabo right there. And this man, I said, look, we don't have to do a show. You're on vacation. He said, no, I want to talk politics. So the thing is, though, with the backdrop, Eric was just a shadow. So we have to close the curtain, but it's all good. We're all jealous. Eric, you're in Cabo. Before we get to the
Oh,
politics, it looks beautiful, man. How is it?
it's amazing. It's my first trip ever here, and people have said it's beautiful. It's stunning. It really is. I've been to a few nice places in my life, over the years, but this is the most beautiful, scenic resort beach area that I have ever been to. It's incredible.
That's
People
awesome.
it's funny because I live in Santa Monica close to the beach, which is great. Don't get me wrong. I'm not Santa Monica is a wonderful town.
Oh, poor
But
you.
I know, right? But it is nothing. It has nothing uncommon. Also, there are a lot fewer, people here, which is nice. But Charlie, this is how much I love politics, even on vacation. I'm sitting at the beach. I'm sitting by the pool. I'm checking the latest polling results, sitting by the pool. So I don't know what that says about me.
Yeah, we'll get into that later. That's more of a psychological conversation about you. That's an episode for another day. All right, let's just talk about state of the race. Before we press record, we were saying, look, how close this is. Is it really that close? Is it historically close in the sense where here we are 50 days or so away from the election and nobody really knows who's going to win, at least according to the polls, that is. I maybe have a little bit of a different take on that. But what say you? Some good polling for Donald Trump in the Sun Belt swing states recently, also.
Yeah, it's weird. I think we are in an interesting position in modern elections. We've been in a period of very close elections since 2000. Every single election except for 2008 within the popular vote was within, I think, within 5%, which is pretty close, 5% popular vote. But I think this one in particular, at this point in the race, is considered by most people and most of the election forecasting models and even by the betting odds a toss up. Look, when you get to percentage chances, there's not a lot of difference between 50-50 and 60-40. Like if you're between 60-40, that's close to a coin flip. That's close to right down the middle. So that's where we are in the betting odds and the polling and the forecasting. And it's interesting because I don't know that we've been in an election like this close to election day in a while. Because we kind of had a clear favorite, I think, with 6 or so weeks to go in most elections since really probably 1999. I mean, you have to go back to maybe the 80s. Like, when's the last time um, where you didn't have a clear favorite? And I think this race, you don't have a clear favorite at this point. Now, people will say in 2016, of course, we were wrong on who the favorite was. That's a different story. Hillary Clinton was thought to be the favorite. It turned out, of course, she lost the election. So we didn't have that one pegged properly, but we thought she was the favorite. This time, we're not really sure. I think the way it's trending, if you look at the New York Times Siena poll, which is one of kind of the gold standard polls based on their reputation, they have Trump ahead in the Sun Belt states of Arizona, North Carolina, and Georgia, somewhere between 3 and 5 points in a poll that came out this week. If you look at the average of the polling, Trump is slightly ahead in those 3 states. Harris maintains, though, a lead in recent polling in the 3 blue wall states. And so if that holds, then you're in a scenario where Nevada and the 2nd Congressional District of Nebraska decide the election. Now, I don't know if that will hold. We'll see. There's a lot of time left. The polling could be wrong, all the usual caveats. But I think that's kind of where we are here. So Nate Silver Bulletin, I reference him a lot. Here are his current polling averages for those states because we're getting so much polling now, state and national, that really talking about one individual poll isn't really that big of a deal. I mentioned New York Times, Sienna, just because they have such a good reputation. But just like anything else, you throw them in the mix, throw them in the average. Here are the averages as of today in the swing states. In the blue wall states, Pennsylvania, Harris plus 1.6, Wisconsin, Harris plus 2.4, Michigan, Harris plus 2.4. So she leads between 1.5 and 2.5 in the 3 blue wall states. The Sun Belt states, Georgia, Trump plus 1.2, Arizona, Trump plus 1.3, North Carolina, this is the interesting one, Trump plus 0.3. So as close to a tie as you can get, but still a very slight Trump lead. Nevada, Harris plus 1.1, which could be important. And then she's also ahead in the 2nd Congressional District of Nebraska, although there's a lot less polling for that. Remember, that is one electoral vote that could decide it if Trump wins all the Sun Belt states and she wins the blue wall states. So that's kind of where we are. I would rather be Harris. I think Harris is ahead right now. If the election were held today, I think she'd win, but it would be pretty damn close. I think if I had to bet, Harris will win. But I think the betting odds, which I checked this morning, and they may have changed slightly, but it was roughly 54-44. Is that where we are? Okay, 53-46. That seems about right to me. But if I had to bet, I would bet on Harris.
Yeah, so basically betting odds, I just refreshed, 53-46-ish. They have the Electoral College going 276, 262, which is basically exactly what you said. If everything holds, if she gets all the blue wall states, she wouldn't even need Nevada. But as of now, she has Nevada to get to 276. I think this is fascinating about, first of all, what's accurate. Now, it's interesting. You brought up the last time that we didn't have a favorite. I'm surprised by this. So, as you know, Real Clear Politics has what the races were in previous years on the same day, September 24th. It was Biden plus 6.9. Remember, Biden won by 4.5. And this is obviously the popular vote. And it was Clinton. Clinton was only up 3 points, Hillary Clinton, on September 24th, 2016. That kind of surprises me because in my brain, I felt like she had a bigger advantage. And I think everybody should also know, if you're a Harris supporter, you're going, okay, so like the Real Clear Politics average is Harris plus 2.3. If you just go by the last 4 polls, though, and let's be real, let's throw out Rasmussen because it sucks, but it's Morning Consult plus 5, CBS News plus 4, NBC News plus 5, CNN plus 1. If you add those 4 up, that's plus 15 divided by 4. That's what? She's up about 3.875 points, right? That's less than the margin that Joe Biden won in 2020. And all it took was a couple 10,000 votes in those 3 states, and that would have shifted the election to Donald Trump. Now, here's a couple things, though, I find interesting. Like, let's talk about Arizona. And I'm not going to pretend like I'm on the ground there and have all the insight, but like I follow a lot of polling. And if you look at the Senate race, for example, this Ruben Gallego seems to be crushing, and I can look up some polling, but I've seen him over the last several days, seems to be crushing Carrie Lake, right? Carrie Lake to me is kind of the female version of Donald Trump, but she doesn't have any of the positive qualities where Trump actually governed pretty well, I think most reasonable people think, until COVID hit. What I'm trying to say is, Eric, I just find it hard to believe. If you believe some of the polling that Ruben Gallego is up 8, 10, 13 points, whatever it is on Carrie Lake, are you telling me that Trump is going to win that state? That just seems very surprising to me.
Well, in terms of the Senate presidential divide, a couple of things. First of all, when Biden was in the race, it was way bigger. The Democratic Senate candidates were running way ahead of Biden in the swing states. What has happened now with Harris is that gap has converged because of 2 reasons. Harris is polling better than Biden, obviously, in the swing states and everywhere. But also the Senate races, a lot of the Republican candidates in those races, Carrie Lake's kind of an exception to this, they weren't well known. And what happens in these states is they kind of revert back to what the fundamental baseline is. Like, for instance, in Arizona, Arizona's a close to 50-50 state. So as bad of a candidate as Kari Lake is, as flawed of a candidate as she is, in a presidential year, if Arizona's close at the presidential level, and I think it will be, I think you will see Kari Lake close. And in fact, I just saw a poll the other day. She was only down 4. Look, I think Gallego is an overwhelming favorite to win that race. I want to be clear because she's such a bad candidate. But my point is, Lake will, I think, as long as she doesn't do anything even crazier than she's already done, she'll end up closing that race and making it fairly competitive, closer to what the presidential race is. And I think the same thing will happen with the Senate race in Pennsylvania and in Michigan and in Wisconsin. Democrats are favored in all of those, Nevada as well. But I think what you're seeing in the polling in all those states, for the most part, is, and it's a little hard because you always have outlier polls and and Senate polling isn't done as frequently as the presidential race. But in general, if you look at the Senate races in all those battleground states, the Republican is closing the gap. The Democrat's still the favorite in all of them. But by and large, now they're closer than they were. And my prediction is that the Democrats will win most, if not all, of those Senate races. But my prediction is they'll also be closer on election day than they look now. There won't be as much ticket splitting. But I think in the case of Arizona, that's more of a Kari Lake is an exceptionally bad candidate. If you had a good Republican there, like if John McCain, reincarnated were running as the Republican nominee, or even like a normal Republican, like the McSally woman who was the nominee who lost to the other Mark Kelly, the other Arizona senator last time, just a generic, non-controversial Republican, I bet she'd be running pretty close to Donald Trump. I bet that Senate race would be a dogfight. So I think that says more about Lake than it does about the top of the ticket. What's interesting to me is how we keep coming back to Pennsylvania if it's a close race. Because I mentioned those blue wall states. The closest is Pennsylvania. I think Harris is very likely to win Michigan and Wisconsin. There you go. She has been, I love how you represent. You're just a Midwestern boy at heart.
Great Lakes,
You
baby.
are.
Great Lakes, great times.
That's right. But in Pennsylvania, part of the reason post-convention Harris wasn't doing as well in a lot of the election forecasts and the betting odds is because of Pennsylvania. It's so important for both her and Trump. I mean, it's almost impossible to imagine either one of them winning it without Pennsylvania. But she really wasn't doing great in the Pennsylvania polling, even though her national polling was pretty good. But the biggest thing that's helped Harris, and the thing that makes me much more optimistic about her chances than I was a couple of weeks ago, is now the Pennsylvania polling is starting to match the national polling, which is to say a trend to Harris. So in Nate Silver's database at the Silver Bulletin, in his 7 polls of Pennsylvania that matter the most for their model, all of these taken in September, all of them since the debate. So this is recent data. Harris is ahead in 6 of the 7, and 1 of them is tied. Trump is ahead in 0. Now, some of the margins are small. A couple of them are within a point, but that wasn't the case in the polls going back a few weeks. She has really solidified her position in Pennsylvania. And as we said, all she needs is Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Nebraska's 2nd congressional district, and she's there. If the other thing that's helping her too is North Carolina. North Carolina is polling to the right of Arizona and Georgia. Like, you could imagine a scenario where Trump wins Arizona and Georgia, but Harris steals North Carolina. And North Carolina has 16 electoral votes. So if by some chance she loses Pennsylvania, she now has a credible backup. It's North Carolina plus Nevada. North Carolina plus Nevada is 22 electoral votes. She could lose Pennsylvania, get North Carolina and Nevada, and she's in. And if by some chance something crazy happens and she loses Michigan or Wisconsin, one of those two, North Carolina has enough electoral votes to make up for that. So those are the 2 things that make me much more optimistic about Harris and are driving me to say I think she's ahead right now, and I would feel better about her position than Trump. She's doing much better in Pennsylvania since the debate, and she has now a credible backup in North Carolina, Nevada, just in case she loses Pennsylvania.
I wonder, maybe this is more of a big picture conversation, which I'd like to have, just about polling in general. I tweeted this the other day, and I just found it so funny. This Harry Enton, who works for CNN, he's a pollster, And so I'll read his tweet here. It says, "This race is tight. Within 2 points in all 7 critical battlegrounds. Harris barely wins if the result matches the polls. But Trump crushes Harris and wins all the key states with a 2020 like poll miss. Harris, though, crushes Trump and wins all of them with a 2022 like poll miss." And I'm just thinking to myself, so basically, here we are 50 or so days out, and you're saying that Harris could crush Trump or Trump could crush Harris, depending on if the polls are wrong in either direction, which they were in one way, 2016, and they were the other way in 2022. And look, I get it. It's not an exact science. But when I see stuff like that, sometimes I just wonder, and this is where I'm saying this laughingly, because I feel like you're a Nate Silver guy. I've kind of become an Alan Lichtman fanboy, so we can debate this. I do think there's something to the sports talk radio aspect of polling, and I'll throw it to you like this, because I was thinking about this. Think about prevailing narratives of this election. Go back 3, 4, 5, 6 months ago, when it was essentially still a primary. Everyone, including Nikki Haley herself, said the first party to drop their 80-year-old wins. And everybody kind of agreed with that. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. So everyone basically agreed with that. The Democrats dropped their 80-year-old. I think it's also fair to say, I'll throw it to you. Don't you think that Kamala has actually overperformed slightly her expectations, because she was this kind of invisible VP? She had super low approval ratings. And now I think it's fair to say she's slightly overperformed her expectations. So if that was true 6 months ago, that the party that drops their 80-year-old wins, and then you have Kamala, who's just like kind of a blank candidate, right? She's just a normal candidate, but she's actually doing a little bit better. I'm not even trying to get into the fact that a lot of the economic numbers are improving. Inflation still sucks, don't get me wrong. But I don't know. I just wonder if we'll look back and we'll say that the Democrats won this when Joe Biden dropped out and Kamala Harris just had a semblance of a normal campaign in comparison to Donald Trump, who to a lot of middle of the road people, looks kind of like a lunatic.
Yeah, I think, first of all, I think that's a broad, big picture. That's a nice take on the race. I think the one critique I would have with what Haley said is it depends on how that candidate who steps in performs. Because, yes, subbing out Trump or Biden on either side automatically would help you if you had a candidate who was at least okay, if not better. What has happened with Harris is I think she's been better than a little bit above average. I
Okay.
think she's been really good,
Yeah.
particularly the big moments. I mean, that debate was an ass whipping. I did not necessarily have that on my card, that I thought she'd be fine, but I didn't necessarily think, okay, she'll beat Trump badly in a debate, to the point where we've seen the polling change in the last few weeks. She also did great in her convention speech. Now, I've critiqued her before, and I think the one thing that could come back to haunt her is her lack of access of doing hostile or at least neutral media interviews. I still think that's the one thing holding back her campaign right now. And if she loses the election, I think we could look back and say that's the thing that costs her if they continue that strategy. But as of now, that's projecting for the future. As of now, her and her campaign, I think, they've been way better. Like, let's say you needed a C grade for the fill-in candidate to have an advantage if you replace Biden, and you needed at least a C or a C plus. I think they've been like A minus. So I think part of it is they've been good, really good. The other thing is that I think is important to remember is that we are in an era of extreme polarization, unlike even what we saw 20 years ago. I mentioned we're in a close election cycle or several cycles where we have all these close elections, but we are so polarized with the social media that people consume, the media silos, the algorithms, the AI now, the conspiracy theories, that it's so hard for either candidate to gain a decisive advantage, either party. So I just think the floor of both parties is so high that I generally agreed with Haley that if you subbed out a candidate and brought in someone who performed well, you'd be the favorite. but not necessarily dramatically.
So I agree with you. High floors for both parties. Donald Trump specifically has always had a really high floor, but a low ceiling. If you're looking at popular vote, his ceiling is probably 47%, whatever it is. But here's again, and I'm not trying to be saying, hey, this is over, but I'm trying to think about the ways that Donald Trump would win. And I think no matter the swing states, whether it's Great Lakes, Great Times, or if it's the Sun Belt, I think those voters are pretty similar in the middle, though. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I think in all those states, the reasonable folks in the middle, I don't think there's a big difference, for example, between those type of folks in North Carolina and Nevada and Arizona and let's say Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. I think the reasonable folks in the middle are almost all going to fall towards Harris. That's just my prediction.
I could see that. And look, a lot of times that's what happens. These close states all break the same way or similar ways. And I certainly could see that happening again. In fact, I probably would be my prediction is that she'll win most of the swing states, but with very close results. Trump still has that. The other thing, too, is the fundamental of inflation. I keep going back to that because I think that's just one of those things that's so hard for the incumbent party to shake. It's almost like a war that goes badly. I mean, in terms of like the two things that just could make it so hard for the incumbent administration. And look, she's still part of the incumbent administration. She's not the incumbent, but she's literally the sitting vice president. And when you are part of a team, whether, and again, we've done whole shows about how much blame they should get or shouldn't get, but the fact remains price is 20% higher than 3 years ago. And people who aren't that focused, and Trump does better typically with people who aren't as engaged. Likely voters, Harris usually does a little bit better. If Trump can get those people out, the people that are just kind of discontented with the way the world is going, the way the U.S. is going, prices at the grocery stores, he can get those people out and reach those people. I still think there are enough of those people out there, in addition to his base that he already has, that this thing could be very, very close. And we could have a situation where, we're doing recounts for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, and obviously inflation sucks. It's going down, but not fast enough. I just look at the overall economic climate though, and I haven't looked recently, but today, record high stock market, right? Interest rates have dropped. We know we want them to drop more, obviously. And even look, gas prices are too high, but you're starting to see them come down a little bit. And look, it's not what it was during the Trump administration. What I'm trying to say is I think a lot of things are getting just a little bit better that improves also Kamala's chances. And again, this is coming from me. I said a couple months ago there was no chance that Joe Biden beat Donald Trump. So it's not like I'm being Democrat fanboy here. I just feel like a lot of the economic indicators, they're slowly going in the favor of Kamala.
Yeah, I think part of the problem is I think Harris is a little unsure about how to make the point that you just made, because I think it is there for her. But in order to do it, you have to first acknowledge, and I think this is why they're hesitant, that things haven't been wonderful, right? There's a natural inclination by politicians to never acknowledge any negative thing or to also never give credit at all to the other side. And I think those are mistakes because I think most reasonable people understand that nothing is perfect all the time. Nobody has all the answers. So what do I mean specifically? You could imagine Harris getting a question or a topic like you and I just discussed and saying, look, prices have been were way too high, and that has affected people, and it still does. But take a look at what inflation is now. 2.5% last month, down from a peak of 9.1, roughly back to where it has historically been. Interest rates just cut, falling now and likely to continue to fall. Mortgage rates just hit their lowest point in a couple of years. That's closely tied to inflation. Unemployment remains near historic lows. The stock market just hit another record high. All of these things are trending in the right direction and moving where we want them to move. Let's keep that progress going. Let's not change it and reverse it with policies that economists have said, which is Trump's policies, would likely reverse some of that gain, would likely lead to inflation. Let's not go down that road, right? But in order to answer it like that, you have to at least upfront acknowledge, hey, there have been some issues, right? But the thing is, people know that. People aren't stupid. They see it every day. Gas prices, again, way down. So I feel like that's a winning argument for Harris for most people, is to say, look, yes, we all acknowledge things have been tough and remain tough for a lot of people right now. And the prices are still too high. But let's look at where we were and let's look at where we are now. And another related point I think that Harris misses out on sometimes is the thing about Trump is he's so polarizing and divisive, and he says so many things that are outrageous that sometimes we forget that there are kernels of truth in what he says. And I think the left's mistake is not acknowledging that. It's not saying, you know what? I disagree with a lot of what Donald Trump says, and I don't think he really understands policy, and I don't think he has the temperament to be president. But on this issue, there's something to what he says. He just has the wrong formula for dealing with it. I think if they did that, I think that happens to be true. I think Trump, as bombastic and as out there and as at times crazy as he is, he does have, like, for instance, on what our stance is with China, having some of our allies at NATO pay more. Do you know, like, there are nuggets of truth in what he says. And I think acknowledging those and saying, but his policy to deal with it doesn't make a lot of sense. I think Harris would be really smart to do that as well. She's got to seal the deal with those voters who maybe think they kind of like Trump but aren't sure, or like certain aspects of Trump but don't like his personality, don't like how out there he is, don't like his embrace of conspiracy theories. Those are probably the people left, right? Those are the people out there that are still gettable. And for her to really close the deal, I think that's a message that could resonate with them.
Yeah, that was my argument I tried to make last week about the cats and dogs, Springfield, Ohio, is that no, there's no proof at all right now of them eating cats and dogs. And then so when you say that's not happening, people on the left go, okay, no problem. And that's where I was trying to say, in my opinion, even though the whole cats and dogs thing seems to be 100% false, underneath that is a real problem in Springfield, Ohio, of all of their systems, their public schools, their health system, the driving issues are all overwhelmed. So the cats and dogs, although crazy, did shed light on an actual serious issue that people are going through. So that's where I think you're 100% right on Trump. Sometimes with all the bombasticness, we forget that, he says some crazy stuff, but at the core, there's a lot of people that are going through things, and he's speaking to those people.
Yes.
All right, we'll do a shorter show here because you're on vacation. You're in beautiful Cabo, and we want you to get back to your family. So we'll do a quick 30 minutes here. We'll be back next week, and we'll plan on doing a live show Tuesday night for the VP debate. And hopefully we'll get a good audience like we did for the presidential debate. Probably not as much, but I think a lot of people will be into that. So, Eric, thank you, sir. And everybody, thanks for watching. Comment, like, subscribe, share the channel, share the show, put them in your group text, put them on social media. Let's keep this thing rolling. I think our last 4 shows have been our best 4 shows in this entire 9 months. So it's trending well, Eric. Great job, buddy. Enjoy Cabo.